Out of all the genres of lost media there are to research, I consider physical lost media one of my specialties because there aren't as many people who recognize it as a legitimate category. In fact, I'm sure some of you watching this video are questioning what physical lost media even is, and understandably, it's had a shaky history as it relates to the lost media community in general. To me personally, physical lost media covers content such as lost action figure prototypes or items that exist in real life, and those particular areas of research are fascinating to me. The Lost Media Wiki itself does not recognize these as media, however, with the commonly referred to definition being the main means of mass communication, broadcasting, publishing, and the internet, regarded collectively. The argument is that physical media does not fit the means of mass communication, but I disagree with this, as I consider the creation and distribution of physical media to be a way of mass communication, whether that be through toys or a public sculpture. I respect the wiki's decision to not include content from that on the site, and honestly, it's probably a better idea to reduce the amount of poor articles that would appear on the site. Not to mention how the community would go about deciding which pieces of physical lost media were article worthy to begin with, and which ones were not. This issue gets brought up even within the main categories featured on the site. There's been some discussion about whether or not it should count. To my surprise, many more people seem to acknowledge it nowadays than what I was seeing a few years ago. So with this new motivation, let's take a look at some physical pieces of lost media and the history they tell with their existence. As I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest and most interesting aspects of physical lost media are prototypes of figures or plushes that differ from that of the final product, or were cancelled and never came out at all. I collected video game memorabilia for a good 15 years, and in that span of time, I discovered there were lots of products relating to Nintendo that never came out. This creates a great combination of research that can be done on the companies and products themselves, but also gives way to the possibility of finding and acquiring these figure prototypes, which are often holy grails of the collecting scene. Collectors aren't intended to end up with them, but when they do, it's quite a special moment. In my years of collecting, a company known as Toy Site became especially well known for its large variety of cancelled products and the mystery surrounding how it all came crashing down. Even websites that weren't directly connected to the collecting community would frequently post about how unfortunate it was that these figures never came out, which shows you how important they've become. Toy Site hit the scene in the late 90s and early 2000s, after their parent company, BD&A, created several successful lines of Nintendo products that became the defining merchandise of the Nintendo 64 era. Seeing this success and wanting more of it, BD&A created a separate division of the company called Toy Site, which would exclusively work on releasing new Nintendo toys for the next couple years. Some of their more famous products include the bendable plush line, but this piece of physical lost media actually comes a little later in 1999 and 2000. At the New York Toy Fairs for those couple of years, Toy Site would display prototype figures from several huge toy lines involving hot Nintendo properties. These included Mario's World, Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Donkey Kong 64. Mario's World included the main characters from the Mario series, but also added the likes of Wario, Fox, and Banjo-Kazooie. The Zelda Ocarina of Time series included a large assortment of main characters from the game, but also minor additions such as Darunia and Stalfos. Finally was Donkey Kong 64, which featured all the Kongs, in addition to some enemies as well. These toys were heavily discussed back in the day, and were constantly featured in toy magazines that reported on their upcoming release. But unfortunately, that release never happened. Not long after these figures were shown at Toy Fair, Toy Site closed its doors and none of these products were made. So what happened to the company and where did the prototypes go? Well, the reason for Toy Site's closure when they had so much planned has only lived on in rumor, with the most common theory stating that BDNA was starting to lose faith in the toy business, so they dropped out before taking a risk. But that's all we've ever gotten. A few years ago, I dug very deep into the company and tried to contact anyone that was directly involved with the production of these figures, but I mostly came up empty-handed. I only reached one sales representative from this era who was confused as to why I was looking for old prototypes in the first place. As for the prototypes themselves, they've made their way out to the public over the years, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. In the early 2000s, when Toy Site closed its doors, several prototypes from the company were put on eBay and auctioned off, so they have been placed into collectors' hands. Though it's not even clear how many of the characters were actually put up for sale, and that doesn't even count the second and third versions of the prototypes that some characters received. For years, the community believed only one of these existed, but photo evidence and side-by-side comparisons lead us to believe there are definitely a couple full sets that were made, which doesn't even include the potential for boxed versions of all of these. In 2010, a now famous auction was documented by VGMM, of which a Toy Site prototype Zelda figure that was shown off at Toy Fair was found at a thrift store and resold on eBay. It took everyone by surprise, and to this day, we have no idea who bought it or how it ended up at that thrift store. Getting more information about these lines and where the prototypes ended up would, in itself, be considered a holy grail to Nintendo collectors. It wouldn't be a physical Lost Media video if I didn't mention my good buds at Kelly Toy. The Kelly Toy saga is quite an interesting rabbit hole, and if you've been following my channel for several years, you probably remember the many videos I made talking about the company and all the strange and unexpected prototypes that have been documented from them. What makes this particularly strange is, unlike Toy Site, where figure lines were shown off at Toy Fair with the intention of being released to the public, Kelly Toy had a lot of secrets at their company, which have made them an insanely fascinating company to research. So, the story of Kelly Toy begins with the fact that they're an American toy company who is best known for the plush toys you'd find in arcades or amusement parks. They've been in business for decades and have held several popular licenses over the years, from Mario to Sonic and even Ben 10. But the physical lost media from Kelly Toy is so mysterious, it's barely been documented, and we've never gotten any answers explaining these mysteries. One of the most famous examples of this dates back to 2010, in one of their product catalogs that could simply be found on their website. Back several years ago, when I was going out of my way to document prototypes and unreleased products, I used to have a lot of fun digging through toy catalogs and magazines, seeing what I could find. And after my discovery that was sitting right on their website, I made a video about it and the rabbit hole began. Kelly Toy has made and released several Cartoon Network plush sets, including Foster's Home, Billy and Mandy, and Ben 10. But something they never released were plush sets for Chowder and Flapjack. These images are among the only ones available that document the existence of these plushes. They were never even announced. My best guess as to why they never came out has to do with the timing of their creation. Chowder and Flapjack were ending their run on Cartoon Network at the time, so I imagine they were cancelled for the fact that marketing of these series just wasn't there. What's even more strange, however, is the fact that, despite not ever being released or being announced anywhere, we can see several characters from both sets appearing in a photo of Kelly Toy's boardroom, that was apparently sourced back to 4chan around the time the catalog was released. Lots of people commented on my original video and claimed they had seen Flapjack ones at various carnivals in the early 2010s, but there's no visual evidence to back that up. I've certainly never seen any of these characters for sale before, nor have I even seen them in the hands of any Cartoon Network employees. I asked C.H. Greenblatt, the creator of Chowder, about the plushes years ago, and he had never seen them before, having no idea they existed at all. It gets even stranger, because if you look closer at the boardroom image, you can make out the back of Cheese the Chow from Sonic the Hedgehog. While Kelly Toy did release a Sonic plush set, Cheese was never shown off, which means this photo is the only evidence we have of his existence. Not only that, but Kelly Toy was also planning to release Yoshi from their Mario series. This miniature Yoshi, along with Donkey Kong, were put up for sale on a Chinese website in 2017, and yet again, they were never documented anywhere, and no one had any idea they existed. Aside from this very rare occurrence, most of Kelly Toy's unreleased products were cancelled quietly without even being announced, and to this day, the majority of them remain lost. Moving away from toys for a moment, but still sticking with Nintendo, it should be stated that over the years, Nintendo has been the source for many interesting pieces of lost media, whether or not it has to do with their games. Sure, there are plenty of game betas that people are still very much interested in learning about, but a few topics not having to do with their games have also become popular in the past. Most recently, there of course was Slamfest 99, a live-action wrestling match with costumed Nintendo characters that was held in Las Vegas to promote Smash Bros. 64. And before that, there was a search dedicated to tracking down the whereabouts of the Mario and Wario puppets that were used at various E3s and conventions over the years. The latter can definitely be considered physical lost media. And believe it or not, there's another Nintendo puppet topic that was brought to my attention recently, something that I've never seen anyone discuss before. A viewer named Heather reached out to me on Twitter with a mystery about a Zelda puppet that had apparently been used at a booth during E3 1998. There exists one picture of Zelda on a website which details the event and mentions a Ganondorf puppet as well, though there was no photo of that, so it's never been seen. We talked back and forth a bit about its origin and use, when we discovered a recording of this booth had found its way onto YouTube. This booth was an interactive stage show that was used to promote Ocarina of Time, and featured a small Zelda puppet accompanied by a large Ganondorf puppet that would interact with each other and the audience to get people to check out Ocarina of Time at the convention. Now, we can see both puppets fully animated, and I'm really surprised we didn't have to go hunting too far to find a video of them in action. But as they are physical puppets, the question remains, what happened to them and where are they now? Heather did a lot of research and got in contact with an old Nintendo employee who stated the puppets were built in Oregon for E3, used for the convention, and then were sent back to Oregon for storage. We'd love to get our hands on some confirmation that these exist, or even some high quality photos. So Heather reached out to the company that created the puppets, but strangely, they have no recollection of ever having made them. However, what this company was able to offer was a lead to a different company in Oregon that might have been currently storing them. Upon reaching out, the representative of this company stated that the company doesn't exist anymore in its former iteration, and the owner has passed away, but that it's likely the puppets were sent to Washington, which is where Nintendo's headquarters are. Unfortunately, Heather hasn't heard back from any more contacts, and we haven't found any new pictures since. It wouldn't surprise me if Nintendo did have them, but just like all the other artifacts and statues they've used in promotions over the years, we might never get to see them again. An area of content that I haven't been able to explore very much on the channel is retail archaeology and defunct stores or malls that no longer exist. I'm actually a huge fan of this content realm, and I especially enjoy learning about this kind of thing as it relates to malls I've visited before or areas that are local to me. Growing up, I used to always visit the Liberty Tree Mall, and have a lot of memories going into all the cool stores that don't exist anymore, and yeah, it's not as good of a mall as it used to be, but I appreciate the culture surrounding it. One day when I was reading about the mall's history, I came across a mention on Wikipedia about a sculpture that used to be located at the mall, which no longer is and can be considered lost. It's the Liberty Tree sculpture, which has some interesting history of its own. This sculpture was first unveiled at the New York World's Fair in 1964 as part of the New England Pavilion, but was later moved to Boston Common once the fair had ended. There, it acted as a public art piece for close to a decade before it was vandalized and removed entirely. At this time, the Liberty Tree Mall itself was entering construction, and it was decided to purchase the sculpture for the mall. There's a pretty famous photo of the tree standing on the construction site, with the story being that the mall was actually built around the tree, which is a fitting welcome for such a sculpture, as it became the centerpiece of the mall for 2 decades. If you go back and read old recollections of the tree, you'll find a lot of interesting details about it. How it acted as a meeting place for parents and their kids, it was the spot of many first kisses, and it was even decorated for the holidays. The tree essentially became one with the mall, and as the mall changed, the tree did as well. Until one day in the early 1990s, when the tree mysteriously vanished. And when I say mysteriously, I mean mysteriously. The recollections from that era claim it seemingly happened overnight with no warning. One day, the tree was there, and the next day, it was gone. Much to the disappointment of mall-goers, as it really had become a landmark to those who visited and knew of it. Since I love the Liberty Tree Mall, and this mystery had gone unsolved for so many years, I did my best to try and locate the tree, or get some closure on what happened to it. There were a lot of rumors that I came across, one stating that it was going to be donated to the local historical society, but was too big, so it was rejected, and others stating that the tree was spotted behind some old buildings in Boston for a time. Some claimed it was even destroyed, but the current mall directors can't confirm that, as the tree was long gone before they joined. So I dug back as far as I could, and contacted names associated with the original construction company of the mall, and directors who oversaw the mall during the years when the tree was reported to have gone missing. But I never heard back. It wasn't until I read a couple articles from the Boston Globe that discussed the mall, and the tree specifically, that the answer about the tree would be revealed. One of the articles, dated September 1990, discusses the tree itself and questions whether or not anyone would miss it if it were to be replaced, while the second article, from 2 years later, discusses renovations the mall would be receiving while omitting any mention of the tree. I thought it was strange that the tree doesn't get brought up again, and the pieces seem to fit in with the claim that the tree had disappeared in the early 1990s. So I reached out to the mall's former owner at the time the articles were written, and I asked him about the tree and if he remembers what happened to it. Unfortunately, he stated he believes the tree was scrapped a year after being removed from the mall. This confirms that it was removed during the renovation and was attempted to find a new home, but when no one wanted it, the piece was scrapped, which is why no one remembers it after the early 1990s. A very sad ending to a sculpture that meant a lot to the locals, and one that I wish I could have seen in person. But I'm glad there was some closure on the topic to end the decades-old mystery. While we've talked about documented lost toys a couple times already in this video, we haven't really talked about undocumented toys that are more similar to the mystery of the Mallow and Gino plush, or even the O'Hare plush, which to this day has still not been found. I used to have a lot of fun covering plush mysteries, and today there's another one that's very similar to these two that completely fell under my radar for years, and it was only recently that I remembered it existed at all. You could consider this the second Mallow, and actually, I think this plush in particular has even less evidence of its existence than the Mallow plush did at the peak of his mystery. Back in the day, I used to browse the VGMM forums a lot. You could learn so much about collecting just from reading what other people had to say, and it's where the story begins. There was a post made in 2013 to the Mario and Donkey Kong section of the forums, which details a lot of plushes that were listed on Yahoo Auctions Japan. This lot mostly contained Donkey Kong plushes and a few random ones too. But at the top of the image sits a noticeable item: a character wearing a blue onesie with long furry arms and big lips. What kind of character could this be, placed among all the other Donkey Kong ones? Well, it's believed to be Kiddy Kong from Donkey Kong Country 3, which would make this plush the first and only sighting of a Kiddy Kong plush in the wild, on top of the fact that this would be the only one confirmed to exist. Back in 2013, and even nowadays, it raises some good questions involving its history, rarity, and if it's actually Kiddy Kong at all, as there was some debate it might have been a misleading angle. However, what's most interesting to me is that Donkey Kong Country merchandise isn't exceedingly rare like anything Mario RPG related. So, what could cause a plush of this character to only be seen once in decades? My best guess is that it's due to the company that made it, Takara, which also made the Mallow plush. Takara is an enigma when it comes to some of their plush sets, and we were really never sure why that was the case. Starting in the early 1990s, they documented all of their plushes in UFO prize catalogs, so we can see exactly who is in each set, displayed in a nice little scene. But this magazine stopped publishing during the mid-90s, to which the set sheets also stopped being released. The Mario RPG set sheet that we eventually ended up getting came from a kids magazine and not a specific UFO prize guide. It's believed that this is also the reason why we currently do not have sets for many of the other Donkey Kong plush sets and the Banjo-Kazooie set. Later on in the late 90s, they must have started releasing set sheets again, as we have an Ocarina of Time one from around that time. But the issue largely stands at the fact that all of their plushes from the mid-90s do not have set sheets, leaving many undocumented. In fact, if it wasn't for the auction itself, or Light Snow Falling having posted the image, we'd have no idea it even exists at all. While the same questions about Mallow can be applied to Kiddy Kong, such as, is he official, why is he so rare, and other points like that, we can use some available knowledge of Donkey Kong plush sets to give ourselves a better idea of where he came from. There exists plushes of Diddy and Dixie Kong from Donkey Kong Country 3, in a pose where their arms appear to be in a grabbing position. You can even see the grabbing Diddy Kong plush in this actual auction. What I suspect is that these plushes go to a whole set of grabbing characters, which happen to include a Kiddy Kong that we've never seen until now. Though it goes without saying that we'll never know what happened to this particular plush, as it never resurfaced. and as far as I know, this is the only picture of it in existence. At the time of the auction, Light Snow Falling tried to win the plush and bid higher than any auction he went for previously, but ultimately lost. While the lot ended up being relisted as the original buyer didn't pay, Light Snow Falling went forward again and bid even more than before, but still ended up losing. I have no idea how much the final auction went for, as it was never stated, and I'm sure whoever did win it was a private collector. It's been 8 years since that auction took place, and as far as I'm aware, the plush has never resurfaced, so I wonder if the same owner has it. Just the fact that this plush exists is really cool, and it'll be fun to see if anyone watching this video also knows about this plush or has any more information on it. I always like finding out about new items I never knew existed before, especially the ones shrouded in mystery from decades ago, and it's a wonder how they ended up actually staying out of the public eye for so long. At this point in the video, I'm sure you guys can tell just how much I love learning about the history of action figures and the companies that make them. It's something that kinda goes hand in hand with collecting and Lost Media, wanting to learn more about the behind-the-scenes work that rarely gets discussed or brought up. And I want to end the video with one of my favorite examples of physical Lost Media: the prototypes of Joyride Studios. Earlier, I mentioned a company called BDNA who released a lot of Nintendo toys in the mid to late 1990s, but things slowed down in the market after that. Toy Site cancelled all of their merchandise, and it wouldn't be until a few years after that when the video game figure market would see a resurgence with a new company called Joyride Studios. Starting in 2002, Joyride would go on to partner with Nintendo, Sega, and EA to produce dozens of video game figures based on GameCube-era games, like Mario Sunshine and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. While the toys initially sold well, the line only lasted a couple years until its discontinuation in the mid-2000s, as they became increasingly harder to sell. Stores couldn't give them away, and while Joyride had tried a few different product lines after their video game toys, they would close by the late 2000s. However, these figures have become so iconic and desired in modern times that there's been a bit of mystery surrounding the toys they weren't able to release, and of course, the original prototypes, to the iconic ones that did release. Personally, out of all the Joyride prototypes and physical Lost Media from the company, the ones that stand out to me the most were only seen in an issue of Toy Fair magazine, which was showing off upcoming products. This page details the existence of a Star Fox Adventures figure, which was never released, and an early prototype version of their highly desired Mario Sunshine figure. At the time the Star Fox figure was planned to release, the variety of product choices from the series itself was very slim, so this would have been the first commercially available product to hit stores in the US. And while the Mario figure did release, I prefer this earlier version. It more closely resembles the box art and isn't stuck in the rather stiff pose the final figure uses. A source tells me this was changed at the direction of Nintendo, who wanted a figure based on this artwork, and in both cases, as they were some of the last video game toys Joyride would ever create, it's not known where they ended up. A source also tells me that during the product approval phase, the prototypes themselves would be sent to Nintendo, so if they even still have them, I'm sure we'll never see them again. But what about the prototypes to other Nintendo figures, or even the Sega ones? What happened to those? At Toy Fair 2002, Joyride Studios had an incredible booth setup that launched the line and would showcase several future waves of characters. There are many differences between these early figures and the final ones. Most notably, Samus being based on her beta design from Metroid Prime, and the Sonic figures having plastic jointed limbs rather than the loose bendy material that the final figures released with. It's not clear where any of these ended up, though it has been speculated that they were trashed after being sent to the factories for mass production. This situation is very different from that of Toy Site, where everything was made, cancelled, and sold online over the course of a year or so. Joyride Studios has prototypes that went through revisions, were sent to licensors for approval, and had a history spanning a few years. It's very hard being able to track all these down, especially considering it's been 2 decades since their creation. If there's any bit of hope to have about them, it's that various samples and mock-ups have resurfaced online over the years. I ended up with a boxed mock-up sample of Eddie from SSX Tricky, because I happened to search on eBay at the right time. That might be the lesson to learn from all these cases of physical lost media, and how it's not really a whole lot different from that of lost cartoon pilots or lost video games. This stuff was created by someone, somewhere, at some time, and as long as there's interest in getting content archived, there will be a reason to search for these real pieces of content that you can hold or touch. And just like how lost media can simply reappear over time, or when you least expect it, I'd say there's definitely a chance most of these items can reappear one day, and to me, it'll feel just as exciting as if a lost pilot or a lost video game became available online for everyone. Maybe in the future, more interest and consideration can be made for the inclusion of physical lost media, but I'll continue to search for it until the mysteries remain a mystery no more. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other game-related lost media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.